Hey YouTube, welcome to Dragon's Dojo Gaming. I'm Andrew Sellers, and I'm about to bring you my GOAT format Armed Dragon deck profile. It's pretty similar to my Red Eyes deck profile. For those of you that haven't seen it, I have made it months ago. And from what I've seen, it's got a pretty good amount of views, and I really appreciate those that have checked it out and have given likes to it. And as always, just like with that video, please like and subscribe for more content. I would really appreciate that. And I will continue to upload more as I am now. So, let's get started with the main deck, shall we? First up, you got your Armed Dragon engine. Levels 3 copies of 3 and 5 and 1 copy of 7. I see some builds run it at 2, but I run them at 1 because it's harder to draw into him. And you don't want to draw into Armed Dragon level 7. I mean, it's not hard. It's not hard to summon from your hand, but I mean, you can still summon him even if it's in your hand. But you wanna be able to special summon him from your deck so that you don't empty out your hand. So as many of you know, 3's there to... He's there as a Mass Dragon target, and he's there to send to the grave to evolve into level 5. And 5 has 2 abilities. One of them is you can discard one monster card from your hand. You can discard a monster from your hand to the graveyard. Then choose an opponent's monster whose attack points are equal to or less than the attack of the monster you discarded and destroy it. And it only works on face-up monsters. And during the end phase, if level 5 had destroyed a monster in battle, you can send it to the graveyard and special summon level 7 from your hand or deck. And level 7, as many of you know, cannot be normal summoned, and can only be special summoned from level 5's effect. And its ability says, you can discard a monster from your hand to the graveyard to destroy all monsters on your opponent's field whose attack points are equal to or less than the attack of the monster you discarded. One neat little trick with it that you can do with 2 beneficial cards from that effect actually is with Night as many of you know, Night Assailant and Sinister Serpent have effects that involve them being in the graveyard. During your standby phase, you can add Sinister Serpent from your grave to your hand, and Night Assailant's effect says if it's discarded directly from your hand, you can add any flip effect monster from your grave to your hand. What you can do with level 7 is if your opponent has let's say a bunch of Scapegoat tokens, you can discard one of these 2 if you have one of them in your hand to destroy all your opponent's goat tokens. And if your opponent has Spirit Reaper, you can discard Serpent to get rid of Spirit Reaper with level 7. And you can also take out Reaper discarding Sinister from level 5's effect as well. But the difference between 5 and 7 is that 5 can only destroy 1 monster while 7 destroys a bunch of monsters. And that is it for my Armed Dragon core. Next up, 3 Mass Dragon. Mass Dragon's there to summon level 3 and Twin-Headed Behemoth in this deck. And you can use it to search another copy of Mass Dragon as well. Oh, another thing I forgot to mention about both of the Armed Dragons is that if necessary, you can use their discard abilities more than once per turn. And yeah, Mass Dragon's there as search fodder, and it's a decent attacker. Next up, 1 Twin-Headed Behemoth. I would love to run this dude at 3. but in GOAT format, it's limited to 1. And I can understand why, because you can take advantage of using it you can take advantage of using its second effect for many different things. Next up, 2 Mirage Dragon. He's there to stop your opponent from using those pesky trap cards during their battle phase. And he's a 16k beater. And he's a dragon. Most of the monsters in this main deck, as you can tell, are dragon types. Finally, for the dragon type monsters, 1 Spear Dragon. He's really just there as a 19k defense piercer. The downside to using Spear Dragon is that after it attacks, it goes to defense mode. But having a 19k monster that can inflict piercing damage is really nice. Especially if your opponent has Scapegoat tokens without any back row and 1900 or less life points left, which I have done to people before. Now for the non-dragon type monsters. First up, 2 copies of Flusher Dragon. I feel like I could run this guy at 3, but I kind of like him better at 2 in this deck. I feel like he's more convenient to have at 2 than at 3. And I also feel like he's a little bricky at 3. I mean, you can summon it, but if you could summon it without tributing, but the cost to that is that its attack and defense points get halved from doing that. But the biggest reason he's in the deck is because he's a metamorphosis target. So yeah, I mean, sometimes you can revive him with Call of the Haunted and bring him, or Premature Burial and bring him back as a 28k beat stick. But all he's really there for is just being used as a target for Metamorphosis. Now for my Water Engine. 1 Tribe Infecting Virus and 1 Sinister Serpent. Sinister Serpent, as you all know, is at 1 in this format. And it's there as a... and it's there for tribute summoning, and it's there as a metamorphosis target for Thousand Eyes. And you can use him as discard fodder. Man, there's so much you can do with Sinister Serpent in any deck. And, thanks to Tribe Infecting Virus, you can discard any card to destroy all monsters of the same type. And it's a 16k beater. In my opinion, personally, Sinister's mandatory in almost every deck. Both of those cards are mandatory in almost every deck. And if you don't want to main Tribe Infecting, at least side the card. Next up, 1 Sangan. It's self-explanatory why he's in the deck. And now for my Flip Monster Engine. 2 Magician of Faith and 2 Night Assailant. They are, in my personal opinion, they each are only necessary at 2. And as many of you know, both of these cards have really broken effects. Night Assailant destroys monsters when flipped face up, and if you discard it, you can add any flip effect monster, any other flip monster from the grave back to your hand. One neat little trick you could do with Night Assailant, in case you didn't know, is you can use Graceful Charity to draw 3, and if you have both Night Assailants in your hand, you can just discard them, and then add them both back to your hand from Graceful Charity's effect. And that is it for my Flip Effect engine. I used to run Morphing Jar in the deck at one point, but then I ended up figuring out that Morphing Jar is a little... It can make your hands kind of bricky, since this is a generic type of deck. And now for the staple spells: Pot of Greed, Graceful Charity, Snatch Steal, and Premature Burial. This is my staple spell package of the deck. And I guess if you consider these other two cards to be a part of it as well, Book of Moon and Pot of Greed. Pot of Greed, Graceful Charity, and Snatch Steal are all self-explanatory cards. Premature Burial is basically a balanced monster reborn in this format. Book of Moon flips monsters face down and it makes it easier for you to kill them with Noblemen. And MST's just a staple back row removal card. Oh, and another card that I think I should include in this as well: Heavy Storm. In my opinion, Heavy Storm's a staple in this deck because it destroys back row for free, and it's at 1 in this format for a reason. Three back row wipes are just nice. And now for the final back row removal spell of this deck. 1 copy of Stamping Destruction. If you control a dragon, you can target an opponent's spell or trap, destroy it, and inflict 500 damage to them. Funny enough, quite a few times I've used this card to beat my opponents when they were at 500 or less life points. Oh, you've got a back row that you're not really doing anything with? Summon a dragon, play Stamping Destruction, I win. Only reason I use it at 1 is because it's kind of generic in this deck, and it's to make room for other spells that are also really good. Next up, 3 Scapegoat. Easily one of the best spells in this format. It's called Goat format for a reason. There's just so much you can do with Scapegoat in that format. 1 Nobleman of Crossout. Naturally, people would play it at 2, but I kind of like it at 1 in this deck. But that's just... it's to make space for other cards, mainly. But it's definitely a useful card to have. Next up, 2 Metamorphosis. Obviously, it's there to send monsters to the grave for fusions you can summon for any fusion of the same level. And now for the trap cards. Torrential Tribute, Mirror Force, Sakuretsu Armor, Dust Tornado, and Call of the Hunted. As you all know, this is for monster destruction, this is for back row removal, and this is for bringing back your monsters from the graveyard. They're all just great cards in this format. I personally feel like that if MST was at 3 in the format, people would only play less people would play Dust Tornado. I feel like some people wouldn't feel like they'd need Dust Tornado, but I feel like most people would want to run it just at 1 if MST was at 2 or was at 3. And now for the Fusion deck. Nowadays it's called the Extra deck, but as all you old school Yu-Gi-Oh players know, it was called the Fusion deck back in older days of Yu-Gi-Oh, before 5Ds. Next up, we got 3000 Eyes Restrict, 1 Dark Balter the Terrible, 1 Fiend Skull Dragon, and 1 King Dragoon. Eventually, I do plan on adding more fusions to this deck. And as many of you know, the fusion deck back in Gen 1 was unlimited. So, eventually I plan on getting more and more kinds of fusion monsters for the deck. Like, I plan on getting a copy of... I eventually plan on getting Warrior from a Different Planet for this deck. I plan on getting 2 more King Dragoon. I want 2 more Dark Bolters, 2 more Fiend Skulls. I also want that one level 3 Dragon Knight Warrior thing that you use, that people usually sacrifice Sangan to summon. One monster I can't make in this deck that I really wish I could make in this deck, though, is Master of Oz. Just because it has 4,200 attack. Man, one thing about Yu-Gi-Oh! I still think is kind of bullshit is the fact that Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon never got released to the TCG till late 2005. Like back in early GX. When I ended up figuring that out as a kid, I was like, what? Like, I'm still salty about that. I'm sorry. And now for my side deck. 1 copy of Jinzo. Obviously, he's there to stop traps in case I play against any decks that rely heavily on traps. 2 Mystic Swordsman level 2. He's there to stop flip effect monsters from doing their shenanigans. And a personal tech from my side deck. 1 Penguin Soldier. Thanks to this little dude, you can choose 2 monsters from either player's board and add them back to the owner's hands. Like if your opponent were to steal one of your monsters from Snatch Steal or Creature Swap, and you could use Penguin Soldier to add that monster they took back to your hand since you're the owner of the card. And you can also add himself back to your hand and set him back down the same turn you added it to your hand, or or on any other turn, really. Penguin Soldier, in my opinion, is just a solid card in this format. There's just so many different tricks you can do with Penguin Soldier. And for those of you that haven't watched, and for those of you that haven't seen Twisted Nightmare Gaming, I have a buddy named Chase who's a part of that channel. And he, somehow in Zodiac format, he was able to get away with using Penguin Soldier and have it send Zodiac monsters back to the opponent's extra deck. Like back in Zodiac format, he did that with Invoked and won that match. And he did this back in 2017. It was kind of crazy how he did that. Next up, 2 Creature Swap. As many of you know, Creature Swap makes it to where you choose a monster on your board and your opponent chooses a monster on theirs, and we exchange those monsters. However, for the rest of the turn, each of the monsters that both players have chosen cannot switch battle positions for the rest of the turn. Next up, another personal tech in this deck. 1 Swords of Revealing Light. It's good against beatdown decks, and there's a pesky, underrated Yu-Gi-Oh deck that I have stopped the opponent from doing anything with. And for those of you that don't know about it, it is a very slow and fragile a very slow yet deadly deck known as Pac-Man. It's a deck that has non-flip effect flip monsters like Needleworm and that 1 800 attack Golem Sentry, I think he's called, and that level 5 Sphinx monster. Swords of Revealing Light is there to stop the opponent from being able to set all those monsters face down and do what they want with them. Next up, Enemy Controller. Another personal tech that I added to this deck. Enemy Controller has won me so many games. It's just a really, really good spell in older formats. And I highly recommend those that don't use it to give it a shot. One Magic Cylinder. Magic Cylinder's a great burn card. I sided against beatdown decks since those decks have really strong monsters. And I sided against Goat Control in case they ever use Air Knight or BLS to attack me. 2 copies of Raigeki Break. You discard a card from your hand and destroy a monster. Well, any card, period. Actually. 2 7 Tools of the Bandit. Great trap negation card in my opinion. Another copy of Dust Tornado for the side deck. And finally, another burn trap that I tech in the deck. Ceasefire. Another personal tech choice I use against Pac-Man, and I use it against flip effect decks. That way, if their opponent has a bunch of monsters that are set face down, I can use Ceasefire to flip all those monsters up, keep their effects from activating, and inflict 500 damage to the opponent for every effect monster on board. Very deadly card. Well, that is it for my GOAT format deck profile. I hope you all liked it. Once again, please like and subscribe for more content. And I also want you all to know that I hope you had a wonderful Christmas this year. I sure have. And I wish you all a happy New Year's Eve tomorrow and a happy New Year after that. See you later, everyone.